coming to get you, Barbara.
I ain't one to make a fuss about a thing like that.
Make your wishes.
They're coming for you.
Hi everyone and welcome back to Deep Cuts of Horror. It's me, Dylan, I'm back. Does anyone else want to introduce themselves while I'm making an idiot of myself?
It's me, Jacob. I'm back.
And they've got Martha back as well. I don't know how they've convinced me to come in.
Martha! Well guys, we're all back for part 2 of Rose Red. Are we all excited?
I'm certainly excited. I've been waiting for what feels like a month to finally get to record this episode, so I hope that we can make the most of the time.
Yeah, it's called movie magic. That's just how it works.
I know I'm certainly excited. I just like talking about Rose Red, so I don't really care what part we talk about or anything like that. I'm just happy to talk about it.
Alright, so we're just gonna dive into it here because I have one thing I really want to bring up while I was watching part 2. Martha, you cheated a bit and you watched ahead of what we did. I'm not gonna shame you for it, but this is your shunning. I was watching the episode and we got to the part where we were talking about the whole him taking an ED pill. I think it was nitroglycerin.
You think?
It was nitroglycerin because he was taking it earlier. I didn't see him take an ED pill. He just had a heart defect, Mart.
See, I thought so too. Now, because we also see him taking one of those pills in part 1 when he's in the bathroom at the bar, and I was like, that's
At the bar.
Yeah. When they're all hanging out?
Yeah. Is it too far-fetched to think that he thought he might get laid that night?
Well, I mean...
No, but you can see him struggling with, like, his chest issues. Like, he's not...
Oh, I just thought it
sitting
was his
there
hernias.
looking in the mirror like, oh yeah, I'm a hot old man, gonna get some
bones tail.
Yeah, get some bones tail. No, this dude is clearly taking heart medication.
Pam, that was her name. God, I keep forgetting her name the whole time. I just have her in my notes as Bones.
Oh my gosh, that's so accurate.
Well, no, that was the character she played on the show Bones, I think. I didn't really watch Bones.
Oh. I just thought she looked like Bones, because she's so skinny.
Don't talk about Zooey Deschanel's sister that way.
Wait, that's Zooey Deschanel's sister?
You will get Manny Pixie Dream Girl canceled. Which is basically, you're going to get so many mixtapes.
I don't pay attention to, like, celebrities or actors and actresses and, like, their families and shit, who's related to who. I don't pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
I thought she heavily reminded me of Zooey Deschanel, especially in that time in Zooey Deschanel's life where she did, where she was doing, like, those sci-fi miniseries all the time.
I love Tin Man.
Tin Man is great. Was another thing that I rented from Sparta TV and Appliances, Tin Man.
See, I have money. I just watched it on the Sci-Fi Network.
Well, see, yeah, we didn't have cable, so
in the hotel room we were living in. Alright, well, guys, I'm going to start around the room. Jacob, what were your thoughts of this episode compared to the first? Just overall.
I think if I really had to pick between the two, I do think that part 1 is better. Because I just tend to enjoy build-up and lore and the sense of foreboding more than I do the execution a lot of times. Because, of course, the execution brings everything out into the front, and that allows it to either succeed or fail. And I think that part 2 does a lot of both of those. There's a lot of really spooky stuff, and when I say spooky, I don't mean like scary ghosts as much as I mean eerie phenomena, this kind of sense of being lost and something larger than you can comprehend. But you also have to deal with some hokey special effects and a few things that just seem kind of out of place. So I don't think part 2 is the best necessarily, but it's not bad.
Martha, what about you?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Jacob on that front. Because part 1 just sets it up so perfectly. Because that's what part 1's intended to do, to be the setup. And then part 2 is where you really start getting the action and everything. What actually starts happening inside the house and that they're inside the house. So it kind of brings about the start of the real climax of the plot. So Um, I definitely think that with any part of the climax, when you start having those, I guess basically what they set up in part one, and you start the execution of that in part two, like what Jacob said.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with what both of you guys said. But to me, it all went pretty on the rails until about midway through the episode, and then things started to feel a little sloppy. Where I feel part one had a good, clean beginning, middle, and end, with consequences of character actions and character motivations making sense. Part two just got real. I mean, I can't say it any other way, sloppy. Especially there at the tail end, which we'll get to. Things were happening with the characters, and everybody's kind of split up doing their own thing, but there were parts I'm like, how did this person get here? How did this happen? Like, what caused this person to do this? That was just and the episode ending on that point just kind of, even though I know what's going to happen next, it just kind of soured me to the experience, and instead of being excited to get to, I can't wait for what comes next. I was more, I can't wait to get to the good parts.
Now, when you say it started to go off the rails a little bit, are you referring to this situation in which we have like the professor and the mother outside, and then Victor banging on the window, and all of this sort of craziness happening all at once for what seems to be not much of a reason, or was it somewhere else?
Yes, and part of that reason is some behind the scenes stuff where David Duke, the guy who played Professor Miller, he died. We covered that a bit earlier in the last episode. He died making this, so they had to reshoot some things, do some body double things to cover the bases. But I'm still not able to excuse some other things that happen. Namely, Pam. She has the dream about the house, which everybody's having dreams about the house and the ghosts in the house. And somehow she's hypnotized or in some sort of a trance where she goes to the fountain and is then somehow drowned. And then now she's a ghost, and somehow either her ghost self or the body of her is attacking Vic. That part just didn't really make sense. Character motivations just weren't where they should be, especially since we established that Pam's character and Emery's character, Emery has a crush on Pam because he's having a kind of dream about her, and he kind of gives her some looks in the background. But it's now Vic who's the main target and thinking stuff is happening, and his dialogue through the whole thing is just cringy. Just cringy.
Yeah, I may not have been taking any D pills, but he's definitely still was cringy.
He talks the way snooty professors think they sound.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. It's always cringy. Like you would, the way he's presenting it, you would think that it would sound better because his voice is nice, but the things he's saying just don't make any fucking sense.
Let's drink from
Most
the
of the
vine
time.
and not of the grain.
But also what you were talking about with Pam, Pam I think is just my least favorite character for the fact of it didn't go anywhere. She had no real development to speak of, and she didn't really do anything. All she did was she was the pretty face that the house later used, to
Yeah.
advantage because it knew she was pretty and knew that, could have an advantage over the others. But that means she didn't really. It was just disappointing. Like there was just so much more that could have been done with her character because it was set up that we would maybe see some, but it just I don't know. For me, it just felt unfulfilled when it come to Pam.
I agree with that. And regarding what you were saying, Dylan, about character motivations and things being confusing, in general, I think that I would enjoy this more if I had some idea of what Rose Red was and was not capable of. It seems to me like it's well established that the house can change itself at will. But beyond that, it seems to have all sorts of other various capabilities, whether it's tied to the land, the house, or the ghosts. It seems to give people dreams. It seems to be able to mimic people, or perhaps resurrect them in some way. Uh, Conjure, gusts and maybe insects or whatever crazy thing Bollinger encountered. it's hard to be invested in a story when literally anything can happen because you have no grounding in the reality of the world. And
Or
so
just the rules of this.
yeah, so I really do think that I would benefit from a greater understanding of how this haunting is supposed to work or why these specific things are happening.
And it's weird, as much historical explanation of what happens with the house. It's weird we don't get this again in how the house operates on an internal level. Because if the house is just mimicking people, couldn't it do that while they were alive? Why do they have to be dead? Are these actually... I mean, we've established these are ghosts. So, are these ghosts... Are they... I don't know. Are they made evil? Are they ghosts that are possessed by the house to be evil? Like, why are they vengeful? Why would Bollinger just be the way he is, running around scaring people? I mean, as far as I know, all the older ghosts in the house, they really have no need to be vengeful. I mean, only one we really see throughout this episode is April, and she went missing when she was 6 years old.
I mean, the one thing that I do love about most Stephen King works is, especially in this one, it never outright explains anything that happens. Like, you never know any real, like, trigger for anything. Like, honestly, I was surprised he went into as much detail describing, the origin of the monster in It. Like, that surprised me because it's not normally like that. You know what I mean? Like, we might get, like, a vague understanding. Like, in this, we have a vague understanding, that they started building the house. For whatever reason, she was led to believe if she stopped building the house, she would die. And so she'd live as long as the house going on. So, it's left up to us to kind of interpret, what's going on. And I'm sure everybody has their own interpretations and theories as to what is going on. But I think they really enjoy having the ambiguity because it makes people talk about it. And people keep talking about it, then it's more likely to stay relevant in the media. But I think with things like Rose Red, part of why it didn't stay relevant in the media is because it didn't have an outright explanation, because people get upset with that. People don't like having to leave things up to interpretation. They get frustrated.
Yeah, and that brings up a good conversation. We've all seen Stephen King movies. Is it better when he doesn't explain stuff, or is it better when he explains stuff and you're just
I'd rather him not.
oh, like the whole first. Everybody agrees the first half of It is superior to the second half, and you can have your argument over the first movie and the second movie. My argument is just plainly it's the second part. The source material of the second part is already weaker, so really you can only make the best of a bad situation trying to explain what this great terror is. It's like saying that Cthulhu is just evil because he has a piss kink.
And all of the piss down there in Relay tastes like chicken. And it makes it As far as Stephen King is concerned, I definitely agree that it's usually better when he doesn't explain things because some of his explanations tend to be a bit tenuous. But this isn't like a binary situation here. You can have established rules and groundwork for the way that your story operates and then not explain them. I mean, that's the iceberg analogy from Hemingway, right? You have all of this groundwork that you've put in, but your audience only sees the very tip of it. So even if we never got an explanation for why the ghosts work this way or why the house works this way, if there was one and we got to kind of see it manifest in the series, I think that would have made it a lot better. So, it's not going to be Stephen King's pizza delivery man showing up and saying, hey, this is how the house works. But we can kind of look at it and establish what it can and can't do and make predictions based on that.
I mean, you have a lot of intuitive psychics in this movie. It wouldn't be too out of pocket to just have Nick be the one who says, oh, the house is doing that. Well, he does do that, but not specifically like the house is using our visages to scare us and do this because it feeds off of whatever.
I also just don't find that sort of mimicking dynamic to be particularly interesting. I mean, one of the biggest appeals of a massive house filled with ghosts is that you have dozens and dozens of dead characters that you can draw from. You can have one ghost who haunts this particular room because he died for this particular reason, and so this kind of phenomenon goes on here. And you can have that a different one in the kitchen and in the foyer and all that. It's like an entire history set inside this one house. I don't know why they would feel the need to use the modern characters. That seems like wasted potential.
And it's not something that we've seen in a lot of haunted house stuff. I remember way back when I was really excited for season 2 of American Horror Story, back before they announced it was an anthology series, because I wanted to see a season 2 of Murder House. Like, what other ghosts are in this house? That would have been such an awesome premise if every season we just got to meet more ghosts that were in this house through the centuries. And I think Rose Red should have played on that more too. Like, the house is so interesting, and we only see a couple of rooms. God knows what's in the rest of the house. What ghosts haunt particular places? Like you said, Jacob, that would have been something really awesome that I would love to have seen explored more.
And it could have been possible because they mentioned throughout the setup of this, talking about the history of Rose Red, they mentioned that there were like 20 plus victims, right? Throughout the years that just vanished. I think it might have been more than that because I think there was like 20 women and like double that of like men that died or something.
Well, maybe we can do a light count off here. We know the guy who choked on the apple, the falling sheet of glass, the guy who shot the foreman. You have John Rimbauer. They don't talk about what happened to Sukina in this. I think she just went missing, if I remember from the book correctly. You have the Ladies' Aid Society woman. You have the actress. You have Douglas Posey. April. Okay, so that's 8. So that's 8 out of 20, not including Ellen, because she just went... She's still technically alive, I guess. If you want to count her, that makes 9. We still have 11 people unaccounted for. The only other one we know about is Adam, and Adam lived. He left the house.
And even though we do have all of these other ghosts unaccounted for, it's not really necessary for us to go into them. I mean, we could have done a lot with what we presently have. With just having like these 8 or 9. I hesitate to call them ghosts because I don't want to imply that it's literally the dead spirits of these people haunting the house. I get the impression more so that the house uses the energy within it for its own purposes, which I would say is pretty much canonical. But let me know if you disagree.
Stephen King and Peter Staub, they collaborated on 2 books together. One was The Talisman, and as of this recording, it's going to be adapted by the Duffer Brothers of Stranger Things fame into a movie. And they also collaborated on a book called, I think it's Black House. Rose Red is actually mentioned in that book as a place where there is spillage, whatever that means. Black House deals with, for lack of a better term, interdimensionality, kind of an appendix to the Dark Tower and all the different universes within universes, grains on the sand, all of that metaphysical shit. So it's something to think about. It's sort of like how Derry is a place where those things kind of happen. Derry and Castle Rock are 2 areas where Stephen King likes to place crazy stuff that's going on. So it might be the house is just mimicking, or it might be ghosts, but Stephen King likes to think of this as the haunted house movie. You'd think he would put some actual ghosts in there, and there are actual ghosts in there.
Yes, but I think more of what I was getting at is what exactly do we mean when we say ghost? Because there are ghosts that are sort of conscious with agency. They go around acting on their own behalf. And then there are ghosts that are more so just impressions of the being that created them. Like you see with trauma, if somebody is murdered in a house, then maybe their murder gets reenacted every night at midnight or something along those lines. And you don't really associate a conscious will with it so much as it's just like a repetition of what occurred.
I feel like Sukina is very much in on the joke.
Oh yes,
As it
Sukina is definitely a ghost in air quotes, as it were. Like she's real, I think.
She just loves doing this shit to people.
I personally don't even really think they're ghosts because they're so decrepit and mummified. I don't think they ever, like the women, I don't think they're actually dead. I think they're just, I genuinely think that the house uses them as puppets to keep building itself. Like I think the house is just for some entity that's possessed the land, and through the women it's been able to get it's bidding done. So that's just my personal take on it. Like I never actually viewed them as ghosts. I think the only like I think there's just a lot of spiritual, like I guess, pressure on that land that kind of enables the ability for, it to control the women and have all the paranormal activity that's going on. But that was just my take on it. So I don't really know what type of ghost they are. If they were to be a ghost, I think it would be more the house using the ghost image.
So would you expect somewhere on the grounds that all of these women who have disappeared, their desiccated remains are physically present somewhere and like hypothetically could be found walking around?
Yeah, and I think that's why when he wanders into the attic, his grandma's there. Like I think I think they all have places that they like to stay.
Probably in the bathroom, am I right, boys?
See, that's another thing that I could have used more of, is since this house is so large and it changes so often, can you imagine all of the secrets that could be lost within it? Like a certain room that somebody went into and never came out. Their stuff could still be there, their body could still be there, but you can't find the room. And so you wander around for hours or even days, and then you finally find it and you uncover some great secret. And, we're not covering part 3 yet, so if there is more of this in part 3, maybe, but that's something that I really would have liked to have seen, is more of an exploration. I mean, you have the perfect setup for it.
I think one thing that's interesting, now that we're thinking about it, we don't see any male ghosts. Even though men have died, we don't see any male ghosts. Or spirits, or whatever you want to call them. It's all the women. And considering what this house means to Ellen, and her relationship with John, being a very unfaithful relationship, and then Ellen's relationship with Tsukino, which in the novel is very sapphic. It just feels like there's some sort of, for lack of a better term, girl power agency of this place.
And see, that's part of the reason why I don't think they're ghosts. Because if they were ghosts, then why wouldn't there be the male ghost there? Because they actually died there. So they for sure would, if ghosts are hanging out, then... Because, I mean, like, even Bollinger, you don't see him after he's hung himself in the Mirror Library. It's like, I don't think he was killed in the first part.
Oh, no,
He
he
got
looks
sucked
pretty
up.
gnarly.
I think the house just took over his consciousness and had him lure Emery's mom inside, and then once he done what the house wanted, the house disposed of him. And so that's why we don't see him after that. And that's why he wasn't hanging there when they go through the tour of the house the first time. Because if he'd hung himself before...
I feel like Pam is one of the more useless characters we get, because she goes into these trances when she touches things, and then she doesn't even remember what she experienced. Like, you're getting voiceover of what happened, which would be very good knowledge to everyone else, and she's like, I don't know. I don't remember. Damn it, Pam.
I'm not going to blame Pam for that. The people around her could also remember the things she said. I mean, she's not very quiet about it. And as far as you saying Pam is useless, she's not used properly in this story, but her power would be one of the most useful of any of them. She can just go around touching things and talk about the stories that have happened in the house, and that would have been an excellent natural source of exposition.
I think it was explained in the first part. She's not highly powerful, but she was more sought after by Joyce. So I think her character is supposed to be more of kind of the odd man out, surrounded by all these people who are very high powerful, and she just has a niche talent that she can sometimes manifest, which I don't know why you need an automatic writer.
I will admit, though, Kathy does surprise me, though. I always love watching it. It always surprises me, the way that it's just the way that they presented her character, and then the way that you expect, you expect her to act a certain type of way, and then she just kind of does the exact opposite of what you expect her to do.
I just love Kathy. I just have a thing for these really strong matronly women that might own boarding houses or be psychic or run a historical folklore department. I just love them all.
So
They're
you
my
have a thing
babies.
for old women?
Yes, I do. When I was a child, I had a crush on Martha Stewart and Whoopi Goldberg. To be a 1980s boss bitch, like, that's the goal.
Talking about
I had a crush on
Bollinger,
Reba.
I was curious what the two of you thought about his arc, if you want to call it that. Well, his utilization in the story, period. Because I think that it's a little bit strange how we see him go into the house in part 1, get sucked up by an evil mystery funnel, and then we have this weird situation where he's hung himself, but he didn't hang himself. All of the characters still think he's skulking around. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Probably couldn't get into my conversation of that without getting into procuring cause of what's happening in when they arrive. One thing I kept thinking about is the first thing Joyce said when she was in this group, talking about her goal was modest, a single twitch, one piece of indisputable psychic phenomena. Well, before they walk in, Annie stands by the fountain, and the fountain starts shooting water. And you can tell this fountain is clearly hasn't worked in years, and that works. They see that, they ignore that. Then the leaves are spinning around, they ignore that. Even though that's on the property, you can say it's Annie, whatever. And then she walks in the door, and the door slammed behind her, phantom draft, the whole thing, and they ignore that. My ass would have been like, peace out, easiest $5,000 I ever made.
So, I always take an issue with the sort of capturing evidence of paranormal activity storyline that we're seeing here, because we are watching a movie. And so, anything that the characters capture in the movie can obviously not be proof of paranormal activity because people were able to fake it in order to make the movie that we're watching. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No matter what
That's
happens,
how I feel
the
about it,
leaves
too.
rustling, the little ghost children asking you to come play with them, any of it can be faked automatically because of the fact that this is a movie.
Alright, I want to put in perspective. Everyone else got $5,000. I just did the inflation calculator. That is about $8,300 in today's money. That still isn't a lot.
No, I thought inflation would have been a lot worse over the past 20 years.
But that's really not a lot for the expedition, especially since in this universe, it's not is it a haunted house? It's definitely a haunted house, but it's a dead cell. And I hear what you're saying about the whole psychic phenomena in the house, and being able to dispute that. Where this movie does do some things right is it's less about collecting the evidence as it is about Joyce and her own journey to seek power. Much like Ellen and the women from the past, so the stories have a good little mirror to themselves. Her wanting that power, because her power comes from knowledge and knowing things, and she's had her tenure revoked, so she is kind of out for blood and desperate to validate herself.
I think that journey you're talking about is more of an obsession.
Whatever you want to call it.
Because, I mean, it's like her life's mission. And she's really good for the first tiny bit, really kind of making you believe that she will be content with that twitch, that she even says herself that she just needs a single twitch. But, throughout it, you start to see over time that it's not about the twitch. It never was about the twitch. And,
The drip don't quit.
she just descends into the madness throughout the entire, second part. You see her from the start. It's there, and you know it's there, but it's not as obvious. And then by the end, you're just kind of like, well, she's fucking insane. For the house, and I think she was I think she was that insane from the beginning. I think just at the beginning she was masking it to keep them there. Like she knew what she wanted to accomplish and what she needed to do to accomplish it. So she's just lying.
Oh yeah, and you can definitely see the cracks in hers and Steve's relationship, especially when you juxtapose it between Steve and Nick's kind of interaction, if you want to call it that. I have called them Stick. That's their couple name. But for some reason, Nick just... like, there's sexual tension between Nick and everyone in this movie. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it.
Oh, that is the truth. The whole time I was watching it, I was just like... I remember the first time I watched it, and I just remember thinking, None of them deserve Nick, but I want them all to be with Nick.
I know they're having Dom Perignon from 1946, and they're in the kitchen, and they're having a talk while Nick's making scrambled eggs, and I'm just like, I want them to be my dads. Like, I just want to be like 6 years old, be their adopted kid, and I just want them to be my dads in that nice kitchen.
Nick just projects this very intimate, empathetic, paternal energy with everyone that he speaks to. Like, he just automatically connects with them and makes it very clear to everyone around him that he cares about them. And yet he's not afraid to say literally whatever he wants. I love every single time Nick is on screen. And the way that his lines are acted is so bizarre. I think you could argue maybe that it's clunky, but his dialogue, I just love the way he speaks. He has this strange pattern of pausing and emphasizing everything.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little flushed. Just
And
Nick and Steve.
I don't want to continue to be the odd one out, and I certainly don't want to start an argument. But you guys are talking about how Joyce is really manipulative and she just hides it well at first. I'm going to echo what I said last episode. Fuck no, she does not hide it at all. She is crazy the whole time. It scares me that anyone would not see that.
I guess the whole thing with her, maybe she doesn't do such a good job masking it. It's just she's in a less reputable field of study. So a lot of what she says just flies under the radar. I have this really toxic trait of having grown up and read Stephen King and liking a lot of off-the-wall humor, so people tell me something off the wall and I'll just yes and them. I feel like if I was around Joyce, she'd say something crazy and be like, oh yeah, you burned that house down.
It's not that you can't tell that she's crazy. It's just her character makes more of an effort. Like, you can see the choices she's making to come across to other people like she's not crazy, but you can still see the underlying crazy. Like, I'm not denying that she's crazy the entire time. My thing is, her actual character does specific things in the beginning that she just drops by the end. By the end, she's just kind of like, she drops her pretenses and she's just like, yeah, no, I'm here for this crazy shit.
So you're not saying she hides it better in the beginning. You're saying she puts more of an effort to hide it in the beginning. Was
Exactly.
That okay.
Exactly.
And then
That's
she just
what I'm
kinda
saying.
stops trying toward the end. Yes, I would definitely
Yeah.
agree with that.
It's a lot like being in a relationship with starting a relationship with someone, and like you have some red flags, but you choose to ignore them thinking they're not as bad as they are. But then once you spend a whole Memorial Day weekend together, you think, oh, this lady is crazy. Because while all this stuff's happening, she's just wandering through the house trying to get telemetry readings. Is that how you say it? Telemetry? Yes.
I don't know. You're asking the wrong person.
That is approximately correct. I would also argue that even though Joyce is clearly crazy from the beginning, she is crazy in a way that makes you root for her, potentially. Because she is in a field that is not particularly respected. She does seem to be very passionate about what she's doing. And so to an extent, I would imagine a lot of people empathize with her because they want the world to be more strange and mysterious than it is, and they want people to succeed when they face hardship. So maybe that is one reason it can fly under the radar.
Well, we all saw this movie from a relatively young age. Do you think maybe our understanding that she was a teacher and she does a lot of... I'm not saying because she's a teacher she can't be crazy, but from a young understanding of teachers and how she does basically host Rose Red Class for the first half of this miniseries, the whole thing. Do you think that might sway the opinion of what we find as crazy? Because you can be nutty as a bird, but be able to go up and stand and form a very thought-provoking lecture. And I think that's where I'm having issues with the character. Because you have Joyce at work, where she puts on her professionalism and does all these lectures that are perfect. And you don't really understand how obsessed she is with it because it's a lecture. You're supposed to be talking and be knowledgeable about the topic you're discussing. Versus when it's just her and you find out, oh, she really is just this crazy.
And can we take a moment to talk about how she reacts to Steve anytime he says something about the house before she has the chance to?
Remember who's funding this expedition.
Remember whose
I-
house it is, bitch.
In my mind, I'm thinking, he owns the damn place. I feel like
And it's his family.
Yeah. Like, it's his family history. He's the one who grew up hearing the stories. He's the one that's family lived everything.
Yeah, she's real rude about it.
It irritates me that Joyce treats him that way, but from a storytelling perspective, I enjoy it because Steven has this sort of frat boy energy that he puts off that
Yeah,
makes
he
it
does.
very, very easy for you to forget that he is basically a lord. Like in the context of Rose Red, like he is the surviving heir to this massive estate, and he's the one that has all the power over everything that happens here. So I love that that's very cleverly disguised behind this normal-looking young dude.
And maybe
And
that's just poor costuming, but I totally agree with you, namely because he's dressed like a frat dude, but then he's like, I've never heard Glenn Miller play out of a flower before any names of flowers. Like, one, a guy who looks and dresses like you isn't going to know a big band player like Glenn Miller, and isn't going to know what kind of flower that is either.
I don't think it's poor costuming choice because I like this dynamic. I think it's fun that all of this history and knowledge is hidden behind such an underwhelming guise. And it does become important later because, as we see several hints of in part 2, Steven has more going on with him than he likes to let on.
Repressed trauma. See here, we've just been ranting about this second part. Like, we haven't followed any sort of order with this.
No, I think we just had a lot to say because there's just a lot that just, like I said earlier, once it starts going, it just
keeps
doesn't
growing
stop.
and growing
It's one
and
thing
growing
after
and
another.
growing. Oh wait, no, that's in the third part. That's just one thing I remember. Nick is just perfect. In my notes here, I just have written Nick and Steve fan fiction. If I have any by the time this is published, I'll link it in the show notes.
See, but I'm just imagining Nick in an intimate situation speaking with the exact same dialect as he always does. I know what you want, Steve.
Perhaps it's just me, but that doesn't bother me. Namely because Alan Rickman as Snape is also on my list.
I will attempt to penetrate. You will attempt to resist.
Like that TikTok. If you steal from my cupboard, my cock might slip into your mouth. It's an edit. It's an edit from Goblet of Fire. Goblet of Fire. They basically just edited the dialogue.
Have you not seen 50 Shades of Snape, Martha?
No, I've not. I've never heard of this.
She asks if he's gay, and he just looks at her and says, obviously.
Glenn. I don't think it was Lily he was after. Anyway.
I feel like we should permanently rebrand our podcast to be Rose Red based because it just keeps growing and growing, and once it gets going, it doesn't stop. I mean, one minute you're talking about ghosts, the next minute you're talking about Severus Snape having sex with a minor. Maybe that's what was behind the screaming door.
Yeah, totally agree. There were several moments where each of our psychic characters finds out that, oh shit, this puddle we've stepped in is actually a bit deeper. Yet they still choose to stay. What are your thoughts on that, guys? I'm gonna open that up to Martha first.
I'll never understand why the room roared. I've never in my life of any paranormal activity ever heard of you opening up the door
I'll
and
come
the
back
room just
later.
screaming at you.
While we're on Harry Potter. Just that whenever they open the door. I'll come back later.
I love how you say never in your life have you seen that, and then a second later he points out another example of it.
Yeah, well, okay, but that wasn't a okay. That was a
Yeah,
different type of paranormal. I'm talking about the haunted bullshit. I feel like wizardry and monsters is a little bit different than a house yelling at you. I was just assuming there was a
This
monster or
is
something in that
one
room.
of the parts of the movie that resonated with me very differently as a child than it does watching it as an adult. As an adult, I think that the screaming room is really stupid. Like it comes kind of out of the blue, and the fact that the characters react so nonchalantly to it, it just makes me hysterical. Like they open a door and there's this horrendous, inhuman screaming noise. We don't even see what's behind it, and then they just like close the door and they're like, "Huh, that was kind of weird," uh, and it's never elaborated upon. As an adult, I think that that's kind of stupid. As a child, I thought that that was really cool because it just kind of further emphasized how bizarre and this house is and how anything could be behind any door at any given time. It's like it made the world feel much bigger.
Kind of reminded me of something, Jacob. As a child, I think I gravitated to Stephen King properties because he really knows how to write children in a way that is authentic and not condescending to actual children. Because there were so many movies as kids I would watch and they'd have a child character who just made the dumbest decisions. And you could tell they were just either pandering to kids or they were just pandering to adults and making the child a form of conflict in that, oh, we have to save the stupid child. Like even the Child's Play movies, I was like, this kid Andy is just so fucking stupid. But Stephen King has a way with both the characters in it, this movie, Stand By Me, the list honestly goes on, The Shining, Carrie even, of characters that just feel authentic and you want to experience and act like real kids, because movies that are on Disney Channel, while we found comfort and joy in them, they didn't really act like real kids. They were respectful to adults. That you got this idea that they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't say bad words. If they bullied you, they just bullied you because you were just the weird kid. And that was all. But I remember as a kid really connecting with the character of Annie.
I never really thought about that, but that's very true. I think in almost all Stephen King properties that have children, at least the ones that I can recall off the top of my head, they are very well written characters. And I think it's easy to take for granted. I mean, growing up, most people consume all sorts of media. You know, they'll see cartoons, they'll see live action TV shows, movies, comic books, all kinds of things. But at least me, I didn't really have a respect for the fact that somebody had to make these things. I didn't really make that connection until I was probably in high school, that, you know, every single panel of this graphic novel was painted and designed by someone. And as someone who writes in his free time and hopefully one day would like to do it professionally, I have a great respect for anyone who is able to portray a character that has life experiences different from theirs. Because the more sincerely you want to convey a character, the more you realize how hard that is. Like whether it's a child that you're writing, and you know, let's say that you're a 30-year-old man, or whether you're trying to write like an 80-year-old, or someone who's a different, say, race than you or religion, it's hard. And so the fact that he does children so well is way more commendable than I gave it credit for.
Guys, yeah, I just thought about this. We're on the Harry Potter train. What we should do, we're going to split the third part into two.
Rose Red, Part 3, Part 1. Part 3.5.
The only 3D
A part.
podcast.
Part three,
Just lick
part
the
A.
stamp. You'll get it.
So does anyone else find it a bit distracting that Rachel is played by the same actor as Rose in 2.5 Men?
Yeah, and she would have been doing it about the same time.
Yeah, so like Rose Red.
That's what makes it fantastic.
That's another thing I had on my notes is it's actually really good casting, whoever plays Rachel or Sissy, and Kimberly J. Brown, who plays Annie. I actually buy them as siblings. It's actually one really good piece of casting they have there. They have a good dynamic, and I really like the actress who plays Sissy / Rachel. She's married to like Jason Ritter now, and I feel like they're one of my top 10 like celebrity hangout couples, like celebrity couples you just want to hang out with.
Siblings are another character dynamic that I think people should get more recognition for when they do it correctly. There are a lot of media where you see two characters who are ostensibly siblings, but they don't act like siblings. They just kind of act like two high school students that have been forced to live together. Um, and so anytime that I see siblings that genuinely do feel like they have a familial relationship, I always think that that's something noteworthy.
Except they don't say stuff like, hey bro, hey sis, like, just to establish that they have some sort of familial relationship, like Sebastian and Catherine. Such
Did
good
they do
sibling
that?
dynamic.
Did they say, "Hey bro, hey sis"? I think
They
I
kind of
remember that
did.
movie very
They
differently.
I mean, in a certain sense, they kind of did. They're not.
I guess
I
that
mean,
part got overshadowed by "You Can Put It Anywhere."
you can put it anywhere.
You could put it anywhere, bro.
Thanks, sis. I'm gonna put it in your ass. Hang on, I'm writing the fan fiction now.
man.
Nick and Steve are now siblings. Go. We're workshopping this.
Get George R. R. Martin on this.
Eventually,
They're
it's gonna be the
arguing.
next 50 Shades.
Is it gonna be about Annie? Like,
Okay,
is that
that's
gonna be the love
okay. I know we're in love interest, but perhaps not love interest. But just you get to see a lot more of the characters interacting with each other, and I think that's really the star moment of this section of the story for me, is just seeing these characters interact. And I really like the little dynamic between Steve and Annie.
I'm just mortified by how quickly you transitioned into a serious topic. Especially given I was just about to say that Rose Red could refer to a puckered anus, so...
You mean a prolapsed anus?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. So Steve and Annie. It's weird how they've kind of latched on to each other. It's almost like as soon as they get to the house, they have this understanding for each other, or wanting to understand each other. When they're playing Glenn Miller on the broken record player, and they're both levitated in the room, which I think is funny. And as an adult, as a kid, I was like, oh, they're all dancing in the foyer. How fun. I think Annie was making them do that, which is kind of funny when you look back about it. Because otherwise,
Oh, no,
because there's no
definitely.
reason how they should all know how to swing dance.
I mean, genuinely, I would agree with that, because it's just
I
weird.
definitely
Like, I
don't know
don't
how to
swing
levitate
dance.
and
Do y'all
swing
know how to
dance.
swing dance? Like, just a room full of strangers that I've never met before, just swing dancing, like all in step, all
Put that to a beat
you
and you
know,
got a Taylor Swift song.
choreographed.
But I really like their relationship dynamic, and through that relationship dynamic, you also get to understand more about Annie. Annie, and her past, we find out some more stuff that happened when the dog bit her, and she froze all the water pipes. I get this feeling from Annie that she's a complicated individual that no one really understands, and we, the audience, don't 100% understand. We just kind of get what the closest person to her sister, has rationalized about her.
I think her interactions with Steve, they both really play very well off of each other, because he gives her that sense of like understanding, and she also helps him kind of just cope with the things that have happened in the house and the things that he just has decided not to deal with. So I think that their interactions are just kind of important for each other's character development.
And Rachel and Steve, I think, are very cute together. They have a really cool meet cute, and watching it originally, I knew they were going to end up together, but as an adult, it just seems kind of weird that you're on this ostensibly your girlfriend's funded expedition, and you're flirting with one of the people she hired. Now, does that make Steve an asshole? I don't know. That's what we're here to discuss. That was secretly the ulterior motive that I was building this hour-long episode to.
I don't think so, because I think any sane and mentally healthy person can see that Joyce does not care about Steve and that their relationship is not real. Now, I take cheating very seriously, and I don't approve of it in essentially any circumstance, but it's hard for me to even consider Steve and Joyce to actually be intimate partners.
Well, I mean, they're not really cheating either. I mean, hell, if anyone's cheating, if Steve's gonna cheat on anyone, it's gonna be with Nick because, again, we've established they have incredible chemistry. Something else that I noticed in this movie that the special effects were a bit distracting, but it's a product of its time. What do you do? The character of Emery. I don't like how for 90% of his scenes he's just mean mugging the whole time. He just has this most disgusted look on his face. The whole time.
That's just what his face looks like.
Is it? Because he doesn't have it all the time. And in fact, when he was on Bones, because he was also on Bones, apparently, he doesn't necessarily look like that. Oh, he was in American Horror Story, Season 1. He's Dr. Montgomery.
I'll have to go back and take a look at that, because I don't think that was even on my radar.
Yeah, he was the doctor who was in the house, who did celebrity abortions.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So now we have a through line with American Horror Story.
I'm sorry for this, it's a bit of an aside, but I'm sitting here staring at the characters tab for Rose Red on Google, and I just now noticed that Professor Carl Miller, and Dr. Carl Miller are all listed as separate characters, each played by David Dukes.
It's like the worst version of the Nutty Professor, the Clumps.
Which, I don't know how you two feel, but I really enjoy Miller's character. He gives me a sort of Wile E. Coyote or Dr. Crocker vibes, where he's sort of comically evil in the sense that the story portrays him as a villain. But I kind of just want him to succeed because he's right. And he does, like, clearly want it so bad.
Okay, so one of my toxic traits is when I really like people, I'm kind of an asshole to them. It's a toxic trait, working on it, but not really. But that's how I show affection. And one of the lines that I have stolen from this movie and used many times is whenever he's trying to get into his office and the janitor asks, "How are you today?" and he says, "Minding my business as I hope you will yours." I have used that so many times. It's one of my favorite lines. It's just a quote that is in my regular rotation of quotes. Because it's just such an asshole
it's a good
quote.
Oh, yeah, no, it definitely is. Because, also, I feel just kind of bad. Because it just also really displays just what kind of a shit person he is. Because the dude was just asking how I was, although I do like the janitor's retort.
He didn't, he didn't even care. Because, the janitor doesn't even give a shit. He's waxing the floors or something.
Yeah, and then he's trying to open it. And he's like, "Who locked this?" And he's like, "Well, probably you. It's your office."
See, Miller is definitely an asshole, and I think maybe for me it manifests most clearly in his answering machine message, in which he says, "Remember your Shakespeare, brevity is the soul of wit." I think he should be executed for that reason alone, but still, like, at the end of the day, we established that Joyce is, like, dangerously crazy, and he knows that and is trying to stop her. So, like, in a certain way, he is, at the very least, an anti-hero.
Perhaps.
There's just no redeeming qualities for him, I don't think. That's just how I feel. Wait, we're talking about the Professor, right? Or did you guys start talking about
yeah.
How is trying to stop the crazy lady who is endangering lots of innocent people not a redeeming quality?
Okay. So
you have a point there.
You have a point in that statement, but here's the thing.
And all the psychics are on Joyce's side, which is funny.
Because he's a good person. Like, his motivations are not well-intended, but ultimately what he wants is ultimately the better thing to happen in the situation. But his motivations are definitely not positive there.
Well, that would require us to get into, like, a pretty serious conversation about what it means to be a good person, though, wouldn't it? Because, motivation versus action. There's a lot of sayings relating to the road to hell that might need to be discussed. I've always been curious, like, if somebody does thousands and thousands of good things in their life, but they only do it because they enjoy people viewing them as a hero, so, like, they're motivated by vanity. Are they a bad person? I don't know.
I mean, I like that dynamic that just an administrative person who is placed as the bad guy is actually the good guy because they're just doing their job and trying to correct someone who is very much in the wrong, but because they're the hero, we're on their side. Kind of like Dolores Claiborne. I mean, not Dolores Claiborne. Dolores Umbridge. Sorry. Stephen King properties. Dolores Umbridge and Harry Potter.
Are you about to unironically tell me that you relate to Umbridge?
I'm not saying I relate to Umbridge. I'm saying that she, from her perspective, she is the good guy, and you have this kid who is just running around the halls at all hours of the night, making weird accusations against their wizarding government, riling people up, and not in a smart way, but in like a dumb 15-year-old teenager way where he just says things out in the open and it catches on.
I was getting ready to agree with you so hard until you used Umbridge as your example. Umbridge is explicitly evil, Dylan. Like, she runs the Harry Potter
She's
world.
evil, but is she wrong? Is she wrong
Yes.
in the fifth book? Is she wrong for what she? I mean, her methods, yes, but if you just had that kind of figure, like a guidance counselor type figure, who is like, no, you're not gonna roam the halls all hours of the nights. We got monsters behind doors. The fact that the staircases change is a liability in and of itself. Yeah, no, you're not leaving your corridor, much less going into the castle, and definitely not onto the grounds after dark.
Well, there's already a curfew. Filch enforces it every year. I mean, they break
Yeah.
it all the time. but it's
Okay,
still
okay,
there.
so let's say Harry Potter and Filch, because Filch is kind of like a lower kind of villain, kind of foil for Harry. Like, he's not a bad guy. He's literally doing what he's supposed to do, and doesn't really do it with any malice other than what you'd expect one guy who's in charge of being the hall monitor for all these students would have.
No, he does it with malice. But I would agree with you with Filch more so that he's just doing his job.
I would say he does it with Umbridge.
He does literally and figuratively, yes. But no, like, Umbridge is duplicitous. She's factually wrong about Voldemort not returning. Her methods are horrible. Her motivation is horrible. She literally runs the Harry Potter version's world of like the Gestapo. Like,
Well, okay. Yeah, I mean, you're right, but you get where I was going with it with like a guidance counselor figure who is, you have this hero who is doing all these heroic things, but on paper, they shouldn't be doing it.
yes, no, I absolutely agree with you, and I think the more that a person matures, the more they start to identify with those characters. Like, when you're a kid, you watch a movie and you're like, yeah, you go, hero. And then as an adult, you watch it like, this person is an idiot. They're going to get themselves and a whole bunch of other people killed.
Or like, whoever has the Avengers insurance policy. It's like, we saved the city, yes, but you caused billions of dollars in damages. Well, I don't understand that. You flung a Toyota Corolla into a skyscraper. You killed 4 people. What insurance company is going to pay for this? Is it going to be the car insurance? Is it going to be your insurance?
Dude, if you're capable of defeating an alien invasion, you don't have to pay for things. Like,
Someone has to
Sure,
foot
it's
the
in
bill.
same
Like,
budget.
Yeah, but
what do you tell your boss? Sorry, I didn't make it into work. My Buick got flung into an alien, and then that alien hit a Whataburger, and then the Whataburger caught on fire, and then the fire department came, but the streets were already backed up because of the alien monsters that were coming out of the sky.
Martha, what were you saying?
Honestly, I don't even know what he after that. I was just gonna say that I think that the city council probably has an Avengers budget. They set aside.
I don't think I'm gonna get much love for talking about The Last Jedi, but this is the example that comes to my mind. When Poe is on the ship with the purple-haired lady, and he's trying to like be a plucky little rebel hero and go commit, insubordination, and try to mess up everybody's plans. And I'm just sitting there watching that movie like, how about you stop thinking you're special and that you know better than everybody else and just be a fucking person? Like, those movies make me so mad.
They make a lot of people mad. What were we talking about? We were just talking about how administrative people are the secret heroes of things.
Yes, because of Miller.
Ah, love Miller. I hate that he passed away. R.I.P. Miller. I think in this episode, a lot of the flashback pieces work a little bit better for me. I really appreciate, I really like the stories with the actresses and Douglas Posey hanging himself. And also just in general, John Rimbauer just being a bastard and pretty much the central antagonist for this whole thing when you watch Tsukina get beat up for 50 hours. I don't even know how that happened in any form of legal way. Because if they searched the house and never found April, why would they think Tsukina had something to do with it?
Well, she was black, and this was like, what, the 20s, the 30s?
That, and if John Rimbauer, who has all the power pretty much, says that it was probably her.
I'm definitely gonna question the idea that John is the central antagonist, though. If your theories about Ellen are correct, and even if they're not, she is like constantly building onto this house to like stay alive forever and is vengefully killing all of the men.
Oh no, I
in the
definitely
house,
don't think that Ellen Rimbauer is a saint in this, or that she's not the bad one here. I'm just saying, like, in that instance, like, I have no doubt that John Rimbauer told the police to keep interrogating Tsukina because she had something to do with it.
Oh no, like we're explicitly told.
Yeah, so I mean, like, he's not exactly a good person, and I think he does abuse Ellen and Tsukina over the years, but he's definitely not the worst one there. No, I will agree with you there.
Yeah, no, he's abusive. He's unfaithful. I don't want to project that he's probably racist. Most people back then were. He's probably a horrible person, but like, I just think Magical Evil Murder House probably beats that.
Yeah, but the whole reason for getting the psychic was kind of because of something John did. The psychic got involved because Ellen was worried about having future kids and what was going to happen to her with her African sickness she picked up.
Oh yeah, but causing it doesn't like necessarily make you responsible for it. Like, the one bad day that the Joker had doesn't justify what the Joker does. John
Are you literally quoting an anon Facebook profile to me?
No. I don't even know what you're referring to. But like, John is a horrible person, most likely, but like, that doesn't give you the license to become a demon.
Yeah, there's that too. And plus in the book she talks about how she makes dark prayers. So she's already kind of dabbling in stuff. That doesn't necessarily make her a good person. Basically, this house just kind of, I think, becomes a home for her lesbiandom.
I will second that.
Well, in her diary, she writes, "Damn all men," so maybe not lesbianism, but definitely her resist against the patriarchy.
Well, yeah, I mean, she basically gives me just like the female version of an incel vibe, where like John is an asshole to her, so she decides that all men are evil.
You gotta think about where she is maybe I just have a little bit more care for her since I read the book, which was supposed to be her diary, but women didn't really have a place outside of men at the time, especially women of her station. If she wanted to have everything she had was socially, politically, all that was directly tied to her husband. Her husband had that, but he was just a bastard who liked to do weird S&M stuff that she wasn't into. She just liked her labias licked.
Was this in the book?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it necessarily full S&M, but there's one scene in particular where he's like playing with ice on her body. That's a bit steamy, or I guess a bit chilly. as you'd say. It's not an old King Clancy.
Yeah, no, they definitely fucked, like, on the regular. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that that was a thing.
Who?
Zucchina and Ellen.
Oh, we were talking about John and Ellen. I'm
Oh.
like, yes, Mark, they did. They were husband and wife, and they had two kids.
I thought we were talking about the
It was,
lesbian.
if not regular, at least there was some. It was at least semi-annually.
See, I knew who you were talking about, Martha, but I also know that Dylan didn't. And so watching that situation unfold was just hilarious to me. I could see the wheels in Dylan's head turning, like, huh, yes, I believe that John and Ellen did in fact have sex. That is an interesting theory.
What did we think about all the inspirations to the Winchester Mystery House in this one? Because we get to see those things with the upside-down office room and the perspective hallway.
I just think it gets reused a little bit too much. Kind of like how Jacob was talking about earlier, how he wished there had been more, like, I guess, of us learning about the other ghosts and stuff. Like, the house is so big. Why did we have to stick to the same, like, 5 rooms? I mean, I understand why, logistically why, that they kept it to the same, like, big things. But there's just there was so much more opportunity to do more diversity with it, too, other than just, oh, it's like a fun house.
Personally, I love the rooms that they went with. For some reason, and Rose Red itself might even be the reason for this, but I adore the idea of houses that are so large and have so many rooms that you just have ridiculous architectural constructs, like a mirror library. What purpose does that even serve? Like why do you combine those two things? But you do.
I love the mirror library.
Yeah, I love it. And the upside down room, it's like, well, why wouldn't you have an upside down room? And then it just gets crazier and crazier as you go on. Like, I had an assignment in my freshman year in high school where I had to design blueprints for, like, my dream house. And most people are designing these actual houses to be lived in. Meanwhile, I've got, like, a room over here that's called the Bowl of Fruit room, where it's just a room with a column in the center that has a bowl of fruit sitting on it. And that's it. That's the reason that the room is there. Like, I just love the idea that your house is so large that you just start fucking around.
Well, that's what John did, except he couldn't keep it in the house.
And something that I think really stands out for me in this part of the series is the rope. For some reason, I really, really love how they get the rope to try to make sure they don't lose their way, and then it is literally sticking through the wall. I think the fact that they're not playing coy about this is why I love it so much. It's not like the rope got cut off. It's not like the hallways changed, but the rope is still going through them. Or the rope disappears, or like somebody gets yanked back by the rope into the darkness. No, the rope is literally sticking through the damned wall. Like, there is no ambiguity here. The house just changed, and it was like, all right, you got a rope? I don't care.
I like that too, especially because you're right, in a movie like that was made today, we probably see somebody get pulled by it and dragged around like something was heavy. But I like the idea that the house is playing coy with them and just building around the rope.
Yeah, they were basically like, you thought your rope was gonna do shit? Like, you genuinely come up in my house with a rope, thinking that's gonna help you find your way back. It's just like, I'm gonna fuck with you now. I was gonna fuck with you before, but I'm gonna fuck with you now.
Does this not... I've got a couple questions about this. One, does this not directly imply that the house could just build over them if they wanted? If it wanted? Like, couldn't
that
it just...
would be so awesome. So, couple of facts about me. All my life I've been manifesting a sequel to Hocus Pocus, and I've been manifesting an exploration of this series. Maybe they do a better job with it in a remake that keeps going on Netflix. Y'all are welcome in advance for Hocus Pocus 2. Well, at the time of this recording, it'll already be out, but y'all are welcome. That's just how it worked out. But I would love to see this story play with more, like a whole series about a haunted house where we're just finding more and more ghosts until this house is just asshole to elbows ghosts and all the things this house can do. And I would love to see someone wakes up one morning and there's just like they're encased in a wall because the house is built around them.
I mean, that would be horrifying. Or if not encased in a wall, like, you just literally wake up in a different room in which you went to sleep, and you have to find your way back. Which leads me to my second question. Steven seems very confident that he is going to be demolishing this place. He's going to sell it, and they're going to build condos. Like, this is the plan. So, why didn't they bring sledgehammers? Like, if the rooms change and you can't get out, break down the wall.
I would say that Joyce would have a fit.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it seems definitely very,
Because every time she brings it up, every time he brings up that it's going to be demolished, she gives him a very heavy side eye.
But, like, her opinion doesn't matter?
No, because she's just kooky psychic lady. Didn't you read the paper?
I think he's just so desperate that it doesn't really matter what she has to say. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's his bills that got to get paid, not hers. And she's not going to pay him for him because she just lost her tenure. He understands that there are
And
arrangements.
who's going to want to buy the house because it is a haunted house?
A famously haunted house.
That people are going to be thrilled to live in condos on top of this place where dozens and dozens of people have died.
I would love to see what the condos are like. Make a series about that. Or would it just be like Children of the Corn Revelations?
You could call it Rose Residence or something.
The Rose Residence.
Sounds like more like a sitcom.
John, did you move the bathroom again? No, honey.
Rose Residence was filmed in front of a live studio audience, and it's just the ghosts have to live with obnoxious Seattle hipsters,
No, it's just them living with Joyce.
who is now an
And
obnoxious
she's there just
ghost.
following him around with a pen, pad, and paper.
She just yells facts about Rose Red. That's her eternal thing.
And she just spends all day.
Rose Red was built in 1901.
She asks Ellen the same 20 questions every day.
I'm Ellen.
Tell me the story again, Ellen. It's my favorite one. Say it, Ellen. Say,
lesbians.
damn all men. Say it, Ellen. Say it.
She just has her Instagram reels on.
Not very independent woman of you, Ellen. The Ellen I knew would never.
Is that why she kills all the men in the house? She doesn't want anyone to get the impression that she needs a man.
What if it was like condos that were built for like a battered women's shelter?
Like, imagine you get one STD and you're just like, damn all men.
That's how I'd be. That's how I was when I was worried that I had one. Let's be honest. Fucking men, am I right? Fucking men and fuck men. But yes, where were we? The fucking the fun house shit. This is where the whole elements of the Winchester Mystery House really come to play. As an adult, when I think about it and like talking to you guys, I don't know if I really buy that working as well as a narrative device. I like the idea that the house builds on its own without necessarily a good reason. Like, the rooms don't necessarily have to be there. I feel like you could walk into a room that's just all bathrooms. Like, oops, all bathrooms. But you get a hint in the movie, which is something I didn't notice. They imply that most of the Funhouse stuff was made by Sukina.
Yeah.
Or designed by Sukina, because she designed the perspective hallway. So you can kind of tell how this house changing itself isn't just a reflection of her needing to build to stay alive, but it's also a reflection of her relationship to John, and that he built the house, and now this house is just more and more Ellen's, and I guess Sukina's house. And for lack of a better word, he's kind of pushed out of it.
I hate to be a downer, but I'm just now realizing, do the Funhouse rooms really serve much of a narrative purpose?
That's what I was saying.
I think it just
That's what
got
you were
to
saying?
a point. I think the point of the Funhouse rooms was just they needed to keep building, and they built everything that there was to normally build. Like, they'd done all the normal architecture stuff. So at that point, they're just kind of like, as long as we're building that all that matters, so why don't we just come up with this outlandish, over-the-top shit? It takes more time to do it, and it's just more interesting to look at than all this other normal shit we got going on already. Like, to me, that's how I thought.
And when we're chasing people around the... Yeah, and it kind of has a fun effect where the house already has a way of disorienting people. Like they're walking up the spiral staircase, and in my head I'm thinking, this house is 3 floors max. And they say it's a second floor, and then you have the attic, which is the third floor. Those stairs were a lot, especially when you consider the grand staircase up to the second floor. So that staircase is supposedly from the second floor to the third floor, or onward. That's too many steps. So the house is really plays with perspective. It's as big or as little as it needs to be, and it's kind of the house's joke that it can do whatever it needs to it can be as big or small as it needs to disorient whoever it's trying to snare.
But when do we actually see that happen? So part 1 and part 2 only. When has someone ever like gotten lost alone in the house and disappeared or died? I mean, Bollinger, but he went there alone from the beginning, and it was literally just a greenhouse. There was nothing disorienting.
Someone who's alive would be Emery. We see that toward the end of the episode. Because he runs away, and he's not even in the perspective hallway. He's just in the upside down room, and he's like, how did I even get here? And he says he's lost, and somehow he goes from being on the first floor to being on the third floor, and he's screaming down in the stairwell, and now the stairs, I mean, it's a poor visual effect, but the spiral staircase is just huge, and it looks like he's been on it for a while. Like halfway down.
So Emery is a good example, yes.
Yeah, so really it is a case of like you could open the pantry and suddenly you're in your bedroom, and then you go in your bedroom, you turn around, oops, guess what? You're in a closet.
Yeah. But think about all the wasted potential. Like, look at how Pam dies. Look at how Vic dies. Look at how Bollinger dies. I mean, there are so many deaths happening in this movie that really don't utilize the house very well, I don't feel.
I will say the statue part in the garden, that was actually an effect in a movie full of effects that don't really hold up, unfortunately. That actually, I still found just as effective, with the statue pulling its own face off. And especially because it doesn't have to do much, it tailors it to the victim, and we have a victim who has heart problems and erectile dysfunction, immediate boner killer, and it's going to give you a heart attack.
I mean, I just still think that there could have been more done with the house at the end of the day.
Perhaps they were leaving it open for a sequel.
Well,
of some
that,
sort,
and I mean,
but
just the logistics of making a movie like that. Like, I completely understand why they did what they did. I just see so much more potential in it because they literally could do anything with that house. Kind of like how Jacob mentioned earlier, like, what sometimes it's not as fun, like, when you're dealing with a movie where you don't know literally anything could happen. I feel like literally anything could happen in that house. And I'm not gonna lie, when Emery got lost, I thought he was dead. Like, the first time I ever watched Rose Red, and he started taking off by himself, I was like, oh, well, he's dead.
what would be fun to explore is, because there's a lot that we haven't explored. Like, we haven't explored the basement. I'm sure there's a basement. That would have been something cool to see. And the house is so big, I know we didn't see all of it. So it's just that wonder of what else is in there. I just wish we could have seen more of it. But I agree with you, Jacob, that the kills we've seen thus far don't really utilize the house much. Like, I would love to see, if we had more time, again, if it was like a Netflix limited series engagement, I would love to see an Alone style type thing where it's just one person's little side story is they're just lost in the house, like weeks on end, and they have to like start eating rats or some shit to stay alive, hoping they eventually find a way out of the house.
Well, I harp on this a lot, so this is not going to be surprising to anyone who knows me, but the more and more that I talk about media, the more I'm convinced literally everything should just be a TV series. Not a movie, not a mini-series, but just like a full-length, hour-long episode, 10 episodes, 12 episodes per season. I feel like that's just the best way to tell a story, hands down. Like, if you want to watch Conan the Barbarian just, like, rip his shirt off and kill people with an axe, fine, go see a movie. But if you're trying to tell a story, I think it's got to be a TV series. Like, you mentioned one guy...
Carnival of Souls, Season 1.
No, like, I mean, Carnival of Souls is arguably not even a story, but even then, like, it would have been interesting to see a series out of that. You were talking about one guy alone in Rose Red, and yeah, that would be interesting, but imagine having a whole cast of characters in Rose Red for like 10 to 12 hour-long episodes, and you can have them go out on their own and get lost, and encounter ghosts, and encounter bizarre rooms that no one else has
And
ever
other
found.
people that are lost.
Yeah, like, this could be an entire world, again, inside this one house. Like, so many different little microcosms of stories that you can tell. And again, I don't know what their budgetary concerns were. I know that they probably couldn't do a lot that they would have preferred to do, but it just feels like a lot of wasted potential.
And I mean, it was the last. In recent years, in retrospect, it's become the movie that basically put the final nail in the coffin for Stephen King's miniseries adaptations, which I think is very unfair. I just think it was an era, it was a very popular era, and it just died out. Which, speaking of which, fun news, not necessarily Rose Red related, but miniseries related, maybe it starts something. Storm of the Century just got added to Hulu.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it just got added to Hulu from ABC. So ABC still holds the rights to these things. Maybe they can release it at some point. I'd at least love to see it on some sort of streaming platform. I mean, Jacob, I don't know where you watched it or how you watched it, but I had to watch a DVD that I've had for about 11 plus years.
Yeah, I had to watch a DVD too.
Jacob, you have what, the VHS somewhere hidden away?
Of Storm of the Century or Rose Red?
Rose Red.
Yeah, I still can't find it, but it's like this thick, because it's like 3
Uh-huh.
VHS tapes. But it's
Uh-huh.
beautiful because it has like that ominous picture of the house in front where it's like glowing
Yep.
red.
Yeah, that's what the DVD has.
Yeah, it's
It's a good
amazing.
poster. I love the poster. I really wish. That's the thing too. You can argue that this isn't Stephen King's best adaptation, and I won't argue with you. But I will definitely say that there are worse, and those are available to watch out there.
Oh, it's not
Name-
an adaptation.
No, but neither was Storm of the Century. Not that Storm of the Century is a bad anything, but still, things that he has made or adapted, there are definitely worse things out there, like The Mangler or The Mangler 2 and 3. Or what? Martha, what are we on now? We're on like the 12th Children of the Corn movie that's coming out this
I don't
year.
know why they keep making them.
For anyone listening, if you don't know already, there was a day, me and Martha, we were just hanging out and we said, let's watch all the Children of the Corn. Well, she didn't say it, I did, because I'm me. Which is very on brand considering I have people on a podcast to talk about this stuff. But we watched 8 of the Children of the Corn movies, and at the time there were only 9.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't really feel like exploring the other one. But now there's about 11 or 12 of them out there, so we're probably going to have to plan a day to finish the Children of the Corn saga.
Now, maybe by then they'll have 16 out and we'll just have another solid 8 movies we have to watch. God damn it.
Ah, damn it.
Speaking of there being too many movies, and you brought up how I have like the Rose Red VHS tapes, I feel like Rose Red it's almost mandatory to watch it on VHS because I swear, just like the house, every time I grab that box, there's another tape. Like, it keeps expanding. Like, there's another part to the miniseries every time. Eventually, it's gonna weigh like 10 pounds. It's just gonna be like a giant
You've
brick.
got to keep it in a burlap sack. Tote them around over your shoulder.
There's too many DVDs.
Oh god, the adaptation has metastasized.
One day you're gonna pull it out and it's gonna be like the Lord of the Rings extended edition DVDs where you just fold it out and there's like 8 discs.
Yo, you know what would have been such a crazy stunt? Is if they released a whole bunch of different versions of Rose Red and kept adding different scenes. So just
That-
like the house keeps changing, the movie keeps changing.
That would have been cool. One thing that I think is weird is Stephen King on Twitter. Because I get all my news from reputable sources, so I get all my news from Stephen King. He's the one who made the announcement that Storm of the Century was on Hulu, unrated and uncut. So I'm wondering what the difference is from the version I have on DVD with like 5 other disaster movies and this one on Hulu. Because it's 3 episodes long and every episode is about an hour and a half to 45 minutes. Hour and a half to hour 45, I should say. So I'm wondering if we can ever get Rose Red out in the public and there be some fun unrated stuff.
You
I mean,
like
I don't doubt it.
Original footage and whatnot from.
Yeah.
Do you think they still have that?
If they have it for Storm of the Century, which came out like 2 years prior, I'm sure they do. Or maybe it's just Stephen King doing his thing. That's one thing about Stephen King adaptations. He literally does not care about how good the adaptation is as long as it's getting adapted. He is one of those people, all press is good press kind of people. One of his quotes for when the Dark Tower movie came out is, "It's all thriller, no filler." And then people watched it and it was all bull and all shit.
Well, I'm not sure if Stephen King even distinguishes between good and bad writing. I think he just...
Oh, no, he doesn't.
He just writes. He's like, Ancient Primordial Fear Demon? Great. Child Orgy? Great, let's do it.
Well, when you're a creator like that, that's kind of how you have to be. That's how you stand out against everybody else, because your project doesn't have to be good. You just have to stick to your guns. If you can stick to your guns unapologetically enough, you'll turn out a product that is going to gain followers. If nothing else, the fact that it's just solely unique, and that's something Stephen King has done. No one can write like him. For better or worse, he's his own thing. I'm trying to find a good analogy for him, but I really can't. Perhaps Chick-fil-A? He's like the Chick-fil-A of authors. Many are like him, but none are exactly like him.
Yeah, like you can pick it up and you can tell it's a Stephen King.
I don't know. It's not the best analogy. If I had more time, I could probably come up with something a bit better. Jacob just has a confused look on his face for those.
Fucking Chick-fil-A, what are you talking about?
Exactly. That's exactly my point, Jacob.
Have either of you ever played the board game Betrayal at House on the Hill?
No. I was busy getting laid.
As far as board games are concerned, it's on the simpler end of things, but it's really fun. So the premise is that you are a bunch of explorers, and you are going through this haunted house. And the way that it works is you have a tile for the foyer. And then every time you go through a door, you will randomly flip a room tile and connect it to that door. So you might go through the foyer and then, oh, now you're out on the patio, or oh, now you're in the ballroom. So you're like building this massive haunted mansion as you explore it. And it's basically just the exact premise of Rose Red, and it's really cool.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. We might have to play that sometime.
Yeah.
It would probably make for good content.
We'd have to live stream it, probably. Because I'm not a very audible game player unless I'm just saying fuck this and flipping the board.
And you get to like discover items like Ouija boards and chainsaws and the blueprints to the house and all that. And then toward the end, the haunt will be revealed, and generally one of the explorers will become a traitor and start like working for the house, and you have to figure out a way to escape.
I like that idea. That sounds a lot like Rose Red, actually. One thing can any of you kind of pull apart why these people are deciding to stay where they are? Because they see all this stuff, and to me, we know the house is haunted. That's not even in question. But them still choosing to stay, there's no rationalization. And $5,000, which is the equivalent of $8,500 now, that doesn't really That doesn't really make me want to say, oh, I have to stay. I really need $8,000. Like, that pays off my credit card.
Well, I have a few reasons actually. I mean, one, we have established that at least some of the characters really do need to do this. I would say that I'm not questioning Emery, and I'm not questioning Rachel and Annie. Like,
Yeah, they have motivation for it.
I understand why they're there. And I also understand that we can't go into that level of depth for all the characters. So I don't blame the series for not showing us exactly why everyone is there. The second reason, there is simply like a dignity and an honor to following through with your commitments. Like, they agreed to do this, and they knew what they were getting themselves into, so they're gonna go through with it, and I think that makes them more likable.
I just saw a corpse with Slim Jim fingers try to make love to me in bed. My honor and dignity's out the window. Once I saw Slim Jim fingers with her hands painted.
And then the third thing is, I don't know, I have had like arguments with people over what constitutes a lot of money. I am on your side. Like, $8,000, $10,000, that is not a lot of money when you look at it objectively. I mean, even like a modest house is going to cost you upwards of $200,000, if not more. Like, a vehicle is going to cost you, $60,000 or more. Even a used vehicle, if you're not buying it from Dave down the street, it's going to be like $10,000 to $20,000. People like to pretend that just because most people are poor, that $10,000 is a lot of money, but that's not true.
Especially when you're considering this is Seattle. So the cost of living is exponentially higher, even for the time.
And I think it's offensive to people who have like low incomes to call that a lot of money, because that would be like giving a beggar a slice of bread and claiming that that's a lot of food. I think it's offensive.
Perhaps if it were truly a dead cell, it would really be worth it. And in the beginning, they're saying it's a dead cell, and they kind of play it off like, oh, we'll be lucky to get one twitch, one little piece of psychic phenomena. But from the minute they get there, from jump, they are experiencing psychic phenomena in the house. So and that's again my point where I'm like, wow, easiest $5,000 I ever made, and then walking out with my backpack and shit. Like, you got what you need.
Yeah, I didn't have to spend all of the damn, what was it, Memorial Weekend they were over there?
Yeah, I'd be like, what's her name in Scream 2? Did you get that on film?
Did you get that? We can move on now, right?
Do you not get the impression that at least maybe half of them actually want to be there, though? Like, I feel like they take pride in their abilities, and they enjoy being somewhere where they get to manifest them so readily.
I have a headcanon that Nick is a bit suicidal. Because Nick seems like he's in on the joke this whole time. Especially with how he's able to know things are happening ahead of time. I feel like he saw all this coming, and he makes little comments that kind of give you an inkling that he knows what's to come. And he ultimately does sacrifice himself in the third part, which is a cop-out move. Not for him, but more for the story, because I love the character of Nick so much. I think he's arguably more interesting than a lot of the characters we get to face. Spoiler alert if you haven't watched it all, but that's why we're here, because people haven't watched this and we need to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll go into details on part 3 with that, because I have a lot to say about that too, but we'll talk about that when we get to it.
But all of his actions aren't in self-preservation. You have a lot of these characters, when they're in danger, they're trying to save themselves. Emery, Vic, Pam, all of them are acting in self-preservation. Not Nick. Nick is the first one to come to other people's aid. When Vic falls down, Nick takes a billiard cue and tries to pound out the window with a billiard cue. But it just won't budge. The window is made of some crazy force that can't be broken. And that's my headcanon, that he's just kind of resigned to his fate, I guess. And if he lives, he has $5,000, but if not, that's just how it happens. Because you also think with that power, it must get very tiring knowing everything that's going to happen in your life and knowing what everybody's going to do and say, and indeed knowing the full spectrum of the human condition and seeing all the good and all the bad from the everyday life. Perhaps I'm just reading into it, but that's kind of my headcanon.
Well, what is your perception of his powers? Like, what do you think that he can do?
I mean, he says a little of this, little of that. Sometimes I get lucky. But he kind of does walk around with this all-knowing stuff. So I think he is pre and post cognitive. And he is very intuitive as an individual. Just from the things he says and the things that we see that we know he experiences. And he seems to be the only one. Well, Annie knows what's going on, but she can't vocalize those things. Nick is the only one who seems to have an understanding of what this house is and what it's doing to everyone else. And I feel like we can take it as pretty much fact if he says the house is doing this. It isn't him speculating on it.
I simply got the impression that he was able to read minds. And so when he knows what the people around him are thinking and feeling, and he can appear to be post-cognitive because he can see people's memories. Like when Steve approaches Rose Red and he remembers getting lost, that's Nick reading his mind. That's not like Nick just kind of magically knowing that it happened. Which I think is interesting because you talked about how Nick does seem to be very intuitive about what the house wants as well. He says, oh, the house is doing X or the house is doing Y. That almost implies that the house itself has a will or a mind that Nick can read too. So I definitely wouldn't say that, oh, he understands like the entire breadth of the human condition and like the past and the present. I think it's more so that he understands people very well because he's constantly exposed to their inner thought. Martha, what was your
So when it
perspective?
comes to Nick and his abilities, I think he's just kind of like on a spectrum and just able to tap in, whether it be post, pre, like kind of like we mentioned before. He can kind of just, well, cause I feel like he can kind of know what he wants to know, and I also like that he's selective with what he decides to share with other people, because I think he also, kind of like going on what you said that he's resigned to his fate. I think that he's seen enough and has enough experience that he understands that you can't, like, there's a certain line of things that are going to happen whether you try to stop it or not. So I think that has to do with part of his resignation, is that he's seen so many things come and go exactly how he saw it in his vision, that he understands that, if I see it, it's going to happen anyway. So there's no point in trying to defy it. So I guess that might be part of why he's resigned to what happens to him. And he also might understand, a greater knowledge of what really, should happen, like what the right thing would be to do in certain situations.
Yeah, and then we have that scene in the first episode where they're all at the bar and Nick is looking in his beer and he sees Joyce and Nick to get Joyce and Steve together. And he says, he calls her a teacher, I wonder why that is, or something along those lines. So it's not just he can read people's minds. He definitely has sort of an all-knowingness. And he also is able to harness Annie's power, or at least get her to use it. I always thought it was kind of a conjoined effort between him and her pushing on that wall.
Yeah.
To use their psychic power because he knew how to do it, but he also knew he wasn't as strong as her being able to do it.
You were talking, Martha, about how he kind of has resigned to the understanding that some things are simply going to happen. I think that that's definitely very true. He gives me the impression of like a middle-aged to an older gentleman who is surrounded by teenagers or like young adults, and so there is this inherent desire to try to help people and protect people and like guide them toward the right thing, but there's also this explicit understanding that I'm surrounded by inexperienced idiots and they're just gonna do stupid shit.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to touch the fire to know it's hot. One of those lessons.
I mean, I see that quite often in my own life. I mean, I'm still on a college campus. I'm pursuing a higher level degree, but like every time a new group of freshmen come in, I'm just sitting here thinking, all right, here come the group of children that think they know everything.
Yeah, give them a week.
I'm looking at people like, you were 11 when I got here.
But by all means, because you were a big fish in the small pond back home, congratulations.
You now can be one of, 1,000 dicks as opposed to one of 50.
You have moments also in this story where Joyce seems very much out of her depth. That's something I noticed as well, and something I wanted to bring up. While things are definitely happening better than she thought they did, there are definitely moments where she's clearly out of her depth. Like, Steve has to redirect her when they're going down the stairs because she, for a second, doesn't know where she is. That was a fun little moment that I picked up on. And she was like, she just kind of snapped back at him, I know where I'm going.
Yeah, like she's just unnecessarily mean to him in any regards to anything like that. If he corrects her at all or he tries to add additional information, she just acts like it's the end of the... Like, she cannot stand the idea of anyone having a deeper connection to Rose Red, I think is what it comes down to.
I think that she just has this connection to Ellen. And you have this through line of damn all men. And she just internalizes it in her academic career as men, I guess for lack of a better word, mansplaining to her this whole time. And she takes great umbrage with that. And that's a big reason for doing what she does now, because it is noted in the first episode that she was doing early childhood development or child psychology, something like that. That was her major until she found the diary at an estate sale, is what the book said. So I think she in her little micro world, she lives in a male-dominated society much the same way Ellen did, and she kind of likes how Ellen took charge of that and spun it on its head. And that's sort of a beautiful poetry that I didn't appreciate or understand as a kid. That's my thoughts. But Joyce is definitely showing a lot more crazy in this one. I just think you really gotta watch a performance. Maybe it's just because she's not as strong of an actress as some of the other people. When she's doing the tour guide shtick where she's given history and stuff, she's great. She does good with that, but everything else just seems a little off. I don't think we get you get little quips, but you don't get scenes where she's not on. I think that's one of the issues. Every time she's speaking to someone, she's on. Even when the character who's supposed to be her little personal confidant person, we don't really get to see it, because she's just schmoozing him for the house. Access to the house. So she's still on. We never really get a full moment where she's private doing her own thing, except when she's getting telemetry readings in one of the rooms when everything's going batshit crazy.
See, but there are people like that, especially people that are not in the healthiest state of mind, that they are always on. They have this sort of character that they portray outwardly, and they portray themselves that way to everyone, even in private. And I think that just sort of, whether it was intentional or whether it was caused by less than ideal acting, as you implied, I think that it helps the story. I don't think it hurts the story.
Oh, definitely.
Because like it just gives me the impression that her life is consumed by this goal that she has.
And one thing I didn't pick up on the first times I watched it as a kid, of course, I didn't understand tenure or anything. The fact that she's getting her tenure revoked, that does give her a lot more agency as a character to do what she's doing. It kind of makes this a make it or break it weekend for her.
I will say as well, even though I've been very strong on the side of Joyce has been crazy this whole time, I don't think that she was malicious the entire time. Like, I think that she was lying about the house, and I think that she was downplaying how dangerous it was. But I don't think she went into this situation like, I'm going to become an eldritch, like, incarnation of the house's evil or anything. I feel like she kind of slowly became infatuated with it the more that she was there. Like, she got there and she realized, she saw for herself, wow, this place really is powerful. this stuff is all real. I want to see it. I want to explore it. I want to be a part of it. And she kind of descended the longer that it went on.
Yes, and she knows she can't trust the house because when they first walk into the Mirror Ballroom, she's introducing it as the gymnasium.
Yeah. And then Steve is just like, and she's just like, what's happened? Like, she can't seem, like, she knows the house does shit, so I don't know why she's so surprised that, I think just to her, it surprised her that she had lost her way. Like, she expected everybody else to be confused, but she shouldn't have been confused. She should know what's going on.
She definitely has control issues. I'd say she is a soft top, or really more of a soft dom, and Steve is a bit more of a hard sub, as the kids would say.
Yeah, no, I definitely will agree with you on that. Like, their dynamic in general. That's
Yeah, Joyce isn't so much the main character in this episode. I would argue the main character of this episode is very much Annie.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
Or just, really, it's the house and Annie, because we're trying to understand the house and we're trying to understand Annie. Joyce is the foil for the house, because she has all the history. Rachel is the foil for Annie, because they're siblings. But no one really knows anything about either. They just have a perceived understanding and rationalization of those things. What do we think, real quick, and we'll probably move on if no one has anything else. What do we think about Annie in this part? Do we think she's malicious? Do we think she's, what do we think about her kind of role in the larger scale of this house and how she plays into it? Is it intentional? Is it unintentional? Jacob, I'll start with you.
So, before I talk about Annie's relationship with the house, I just want to talk a little bit about Annie herself. I don't know if this interpretation is accurate, but this is the way that I relate to her. I feel like she has a fairly decent grasp of what is going on around her. And I feel like she's able to articulate that to herself in a way that she understands. But she's simply not really willing or interested in communicating that to the people around her. I don't know if either of you have ever been in this situation. It's generally like as a young child, you hear all of the adults around you talking. You know, maybe they're complaining about politics or complaining about a family dynamic. And you have your own opinions, you have your own understanding of the situation, but you just choose not to get involved. Do either of you relate to that situation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of the impression that I get from Annie. I don't think that she's unable. I mean, she does clearly have some mental stuff going on to whatever extent and whatever direction that takes, but I think that she's a lot more competent and a lot more, I guess, sapient than people might give her credit for. She's just on a bit of a different wavelength. As far as her connection with the house, I don't know. And just from what we get in part 1 and part 2, I don't think you can draw too many firm conclusions. It almost feels to me like she relates to the house on a certain extent. Like Annie is a massive conduit of psychic energy, and the house is a massive conduit of psychic energy. So there's almost like a familial relationship between the two of them.
But she also isn't afraid to put the house in check.
Yes.
Like
See,
when
but
she
that
yelled
doesn't
at
come
the
till-
screaming door.
Yeah, I feel like, and that comes in, and that will be kind of like how I feel about Annie in general. Is I think she has a definite connection with the house, because I think with Annie, her whole life, she's never really been encouraged to be allowed to like express her psychic abilities or really just be herself. She's always just been put into a box and, you know, been forced to kind of stay there. So I think when she gets to the house and the house is calling to her and the house has a need for her and she feels like she belongs and she's accepted, I think she's kind of a little bit complicit with the house because she doesn't fully understand the negative impacts of the things that the house is really wanting. So she's kind of like just going along with it, you know, just happy to be there. And then I think throughout the course of what happens in part 2, starting into what, you know, to part 3, she really starts to see maybe the house's true intent, and she starts to realize that even though, you know, she feels accepted and like she belongs for the first time, she's got to do like the right thing. So I think that kind of helps with her character development too.
You know that story arc that you see in a lot of different media where the main character feels alone and misunderstood, and so they encounter someone else who's similar to them, like say that they both have the same superpower or whatnot, and then they like develop a friendship, and then the main character slowly realizes that this person is really toxic, and then they become enemies and they have a confrontation. I feel like that's the exact storyline that we're seeing here. It's just that one of the participants is a house. And I know
Oh yeah, I
this is
like that.
basically what I just said. It's basically what Martha just said and what you just said, Dylan. But it just occurred to me that we see this story a lot with two humans, and it's just in this instance we're seeing it with a house, and that's kind of funny.
Yeah, I'm also kind of thinking about Joyce's relationship with Annie and how she kind of coaxes and encourages her interaction with the house. And every time she does, the house seems to give Annie a bit more. It's almost like the house, at the same time that she's being a battery for this house, as she's called, the house is also coaxing her to do things. Like that wall was put there on purpose, so Annie would have to move it. And in doing so, the house kind of gave her the reward of that little model of Rose Red. And also giving her the reward of the dominoes and the weird Raggedy Annabelle doll. So it's almost like a tit for tat, like the house wants her to feel welcome there so that she stays there. So if you contextualize the house less as a house and more as a person, an entity with its own understanding, that makes for a really good watch, especially when you think about how, okay, the two big protagonists of this story, well, the two big characters in this house, Rose Red and Annie, are two characters that by design we're going to have very little understanding of unless we put that understanding to them.
So a couple minor things related to Annie, and then one about Emery. So firstly, I just wanted to make sure that I put it out there that I think the scene in the bedroom with Annie and Rachel is adorable, and that they really, really do capture very well the nature of their sibling relationship, and I think it fleshes out both of those characters very well. I know we talked about them being siblings earlier, but I don't think we mentioned that scene specifically, and I just wanted to call it out because I really liked it. The second thing about Annie is when Rachel is explaining the dog situation to Steve, please double check me on this. Do they use the phrase "the dog had been destroyed"?
Yeah, they did.
Okay, so a lot of children's shows say really wacky things because they're not allowed to use the word kill, right? Like, if you do this again, I will destroy you, or this will be your
Yeah.
permanent end, or whatnot. This is not a children's show. Why did they say the dog had been destroyed? That is such a weird thing to say.
It's actually the common term for it is having it destroyed. Because legally it is personal property. In fact, if you watch the Wizard of Oz movie, the original Wizard of Oz movie, Elmira Gulch says, I'll turn the dog over the law and have it destroyed. That's one of her lines.
Respectfully, I don't know if I could take any person seriously who referred to the killing of a sapient beloved creature as destruction of property.
Legally, that's kind of where it falls in, unfortunately.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous. Like,
It's property. Do you own a dog? Well, technically you do own a dog, but really my dog's just my buddy that lives with me.
like the dog was killed. Like, that's the word. And then Emery.
The dog was murdered. Like, let's not sugarcoat this. The dog was murdered. It wasn't killed, it was murdered.
The thing with Emery, so I've talked a lot in part one about how I find all of these characters to be very likable, which is something that sets it apart from a lot of horror movies. Like, I'm rooting for these characters, I'm enjoying them interact. And that includes Emery, despite the fact that he is almost always really sour and unhappy. But I cannot stand the scene with him and Victor, at Victor's death, in part two. To me,
Oh, yeah.
it just makes his character insufferable. Like, I under I understand that he has convinced himself that this isn't real, but I feel it should be very clear to any decent person that you have to weigh the odds of this being real versus it not being real. If you're wrong, then this man is having a heart attack right in front of you and is going to die because of you. And to me, Emery just comes off as horribly incompetent and insufferable because of this reason alone. And if it were a book and we got to see inside his head, I would want him to be regretting this event and like learning from it and growing as a person. Like, I want him to be torn up about Victor's death.
Well, 2 points with that, Jacob, that I'm going to touch on real quick. It's funny you said a character from a book, because honestly, this character is very reminiscent of another Stephen King character from a book, which is Harold Lauder from The Stand. Who's very much the same character, kind of an incel type, big thick glasses, overweight, kind of a mama's boy, sort of that incel before incel type. And actually, Harold's middle name is Emery. So, I think that might have been a bit intentional. Last time we were talking, we discussed how this movie was kind of Stephen King's greatest hits, and I think that's one of those, is Emery is kind of a Harold replacement character, especially since they have the same middle name and aren't ostensibly almost the same character, despite a few little things. And another thing we get from Jump, and we talked about this last week as well, he's seeing visions of these things. So we're to understand he sees visions of a lot of things, and from this process on, he hasn't really known what's real and what's not. And we kind of get that because I think one of the things he's always sour about is it's sort of an emotional guard for him. Because if he's sour and he's questioning everything and he's obstinate to everything, then he has to question that reality. And if that's directly in front of him at all times. And he's been up all night having these visions of all these people and all these things going on and seeing the actress. I'd probably be a bit froggy too if I were him, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, he seems like, between the interactions with him and his mom and just how he talks, you could tell this isn't the first time he's done something like this. So, I mean, like, it's obvious that he's been using his abilities to make extra money for a hot minute.
Oh yeah, I bet
And
you
so-
you have this feeling that these people have been on the talk show circuit a time or two.
Yeah, and you feel like they've seen some shit, to be honest.
Otherwise, why wouldn't you have turned away already?
Exactly. So I feel like they're really used to it, and I think that's part of the reason why. I know before one of the questions that was posed, I don't know if I think it was Jacob that posted, why don't they just leave? What did they say?
That was Dylan.
Oh, was it Dylan?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the why, is just because this is nothing, like, at first, it's nothing super out of what they've dealt with before, I guess, or with them being psychic, I guess they just have, like, a high tolerance of bullshit, like, they're just, like,
Was there anything else you had to add, Jacob?
No, but I did recall one other thing about Emery. A very, very small detail, but I really loved it, is when his mother is looking for him and she starts to hear his voice calling out for help. I don't remember exactly what she says, but she says something along the lines of, Emmers, where are you, or whatnot, in this voice that just very clearly communicates that she's still viewing him as a little boy. And this has clearly had a horrendously negative impact on their relationship. But in that moment, to me, it was just so sweet. Because as toxic of a mother as she is, you could see that she really does view him that way, and she really is just trying to protect him and love him. And I just found it sad. I thought that was really well done.
It is a good character moment, and it's little moments like that I think stand out the most for me. I love it when, because you can definitely tell the actors that aren't as seasoned and are just giving what is on paper, versus those that internalize the information and try to come up with that little bit more of subtext. Like, Nick, I just see imagining, like, when he's talking, people just imagines fucking everybody in the room. That's how you get control.
You're projecting that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think when you see Nick, you just think about fucking is what's happening there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame him. Shoot.
I mean, he's British.
Can't help
And I
it.
can see those dreams, girl.
Yes,
And
please,
apparently a
look at mine.
smoker, which I don't really... That was weird, but I just noticed that I'm like, the window's open then. But on the whole, you do have those characters that did work a little bit harder, and I think that's where characters like Joyce kind of struggled. There was a lot of opportunity for her to give just a little bit more. To contextualize some things or add some better meaning, and that just didn't happen. And then you had these wonderful character actors who that's just how they do stuff, because they're not given a lot of meat and potatoes to work with, so they have to make count what they have. So you have that, and that's one thing I love, character actors, and how they make the most out of what they have. Probably the best example of good character acting is the movie National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. You have all these characters that most of which don't have a whole lot of screen time, but they make the most out of what they have, and they make it memorable. And that's what good character acting does, and that's what this movie does. Martha, did you have anything to say?
I mean, overall, I just think part 2, just from start to finish, is just kind of like a good way to introduce everybody to what the house is capable of and what the house actually does. It's kind of like a good introduction to that. And again, with the character acting, it does really well with, like you said, some of the actors do very, very well with some of these characters. And part 2 really exemplifies that, because you kind of get to exhaust out a couple of the characters a bit more, and get a little bit more behind, like what makes them tick a little bit more, especially as they're bouncing off of each other moving into part 3. So I think it's a good solid build up there. Like continuation of the build up.
How would we rank the Stephen King cameo? Like, we've just, I know we breezed past it, but I feel like we at least have to talk about the cameo, because we don't see him for the rest of the movie.
Well, rank it in relation to what?
Every other Oscar-winning performance in film history.
Near the bottom. I liked it. It very clearly communicated that the purpose of this cameo was to be a stupid cameo.
Uh-huh.
Like, it wasn't like a vanity self-insert of being a serious actor. It was like, ha, I'm gonna play a stupid delivery man and ask stupid questions. And that's what he did. So I had no problem with it.
He's definitely not afraid to be the butt of his own joke, and I can appreciate that in him. Martha, what did you think about it?
With the cameo?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a cameo in all of his stuff, so obviously it had to be in there somewhere. I like the way it was done. I don't know why it just sat weird for me that Emery was so damn rude to him at the end. Like, I don't know why. And also, why was he asking so many questions? Kind of like what Jacob said. Why was he prying?
I mean, Emery
just so he
wasn't
could get
rude
some
to him.
lines in there.
Fully
Respectfully,
loaded.
I don't think Emery was rude to him. Like, the delivery man was being incredibly rude by standing
Well, I
there
mean,
and
there's
asking
a
all
way
those
to do it without
questions.
slamming the door, like, without... I don't know.
Maybe he was hangry. Maybe he has hypoglycemia.
I don't know, maybe he'd been delivering all them pizzas Stephen King had, and he was just like, I would like to talk and interact with another human. And so he was just trying to talk and interact with them. Honestly,
I
though, like,
made you.
it's kind of cringy.
Like, when you infringe upon the social contract, people are allowed to break it as well to correct you. Like, they were asking him, how much do we owe you? And he would ignore them and start asking stupid questions. So, like, being rude to him, I think, is justified. Like, you're supposed to give me the pizza, take the money, and fuck off.
Yeah, but that's why he probably got his fingers ripped off. Like, don't be a dick to your creator. I feel like that's on a religious track somewhere. Don't be a dick to your creator.
I was gonna say, that can go some interesting places.
Does anyone have anything else to share?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm satisfied.
Okay, well, I guess to end this show, I guess we will do a deeper cut, based on just our sequence of the 3 episodes just by themselves as episodes and not a greater piece of the story. I'll start the round. Well, how about I start the round table for once? I'm probably gonna say that this needs to be cut. Unfortunately, this part of it just needs to be cut, just because the parts that work are just lesser versions of what we've already seen. And the parts that don't work are just really confusing, without explanation and without the novelty of, ooh, this isn't supposed to be explained. What about you, Martha? Where are you on the deeper cut scale?
Honestly, I agree with you on it. I mean, there's parts of it that I would keep, but for the most part of it, some of it was just so unnecessary.
More of
Like
the
some of
same.
the events, like it was the same thing. Like, wow, multiple of them are being led by visions of Pam through the house at the same time. Oh, we're gonna do the same thing, and in 15 minutes later in the movie, we're doing that same thing still, just with someone else. Like, it's just a lot of it was unnecessary. So I agree. Like, there's a whole chunk of this that I honestly would just completely cut out.
What about you, Jacoby?
Well, I'm not really sure how properly the deeper cut system applies to the middle part of a miniseries, because obviously you cannot literally cut this and have the story still make sense.
No, of course not.
In a more symbolic sense, I would agree with the two of you that this really wasn't a shining example of what Rose Red could have been. I enjoyed it. I think it had a lot of good parts. Perhaps we focused a bit more on the bad parts than the good parts. I think we could have done a better job of mentioning those, but still, it's not what it could have been.
All right. Well, I mean, again, like, you can't. The middle part usually always is lagging. In any great trilogy, a lot of people will tell you The Two Towers is the lesser of the 3 books. A lot of people will tell you that Harold and Kumar Go to Guantanamo Bay is the lesser of the trilogy. Still trying to think of trilogies, but it is what it is, pretty much. I love this thing as a whole, and I love the history of it. It's great. But if I'm thinking and I'm contextualizing, I'm not watching this in one sitting. I'm going to watch this over multiple days. This would kind of shake my confidence going into the 3rd part. Because while stuff's happening, I don't really have a basis of understanding for why it's happening. I love the only reason I would return is because I am now invested in the characters.
No, 100%.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
No, that's exactly how I feel about it too.
Alright, everyone. Well, come see us again next week where we will be finishing our 3rd part in the Rose Red, our little trilogy special, I guess you call it. Hopefully our finale will be better than the middle episode, and the middle episode, not as good as the first, just like this. Until next week, stay spooky.